Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us down a really interesting road looking into Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
It's quite the book.
Absolutely. So we've gone through the material you suggested, and we've zeroed in on five specific laws, ones that really seem to get to the core of how power works.
Right.
Our mission here for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. Pull out the main ideas, look at the historical stories Greene uses, figure out the sort of practical do's and don'ts, and importantly, what you can actually take away from understanding these things.
Exactly. And it's worth saying up front, some of these laws, they can feel a bit blunt, maybe even unsettling.
Yeah, definitely controversial sometimes.
But remember, the goal here is to understand the power dynamics involved. We're not necessarily endorsing every single tactic.
Think of it more like gaining insight into the forces that shape interactions historically and, even today.
Precisely. So where should we start? Law 41.
Let's do it. Law 41 states, despise the free lunch. Okay, sounds simple enough, but let's unpack that. What's the real core idea here?
Well, at its heart, Law 41 is basically arguing that anything offered for free, it almost never is. There's usually some kind of hidden string attached, maybe an obligation, maybe a manipulative angle, or it's just a way to make you dependent.
Okay.
So the idea is by paying your own way, by putting in your own effort, your own resources, you keep control. You avoid those unseen debts.
That makes sense. And I guess for someone wanting to really understand something thoroughly, like our listeners, that rings true, right? Free info can be kind of shallow, maybe biased.
It absolutely does. You often get what you pay for, like you said, in more ways than one.
Now, Greene uses some interesting history to back this up. Tell us about Pietro Perugino, the painter.
Right, Perugino. So he faced real poverty early on. And Greene's point is that this hardship actually fueled his drive. It pushed him to master his craft, to work incredibly hard for financial security.
So the struggle was actually productive.
That's the implication. If things had come too easily, maybe that core motivation, that need to strive, wouldn't have been there. It might have even stifled his talent.
So a key takeaway there is that real mastery often comes through earned struggle, not just being handed something.
That's a powerful point. And it connects to this other idea he brings up about inherited wealth or power often getting, well, squandered.
Yes, because the drive isn't there.
Precisely. Greene notes that people who inherit their position often lack that initial hunger, that grit that comes from having to earn it. He even pulls in Machiavelli.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Machiavelli observed that the children of hereditary rulers often just slide into laziness, indulgence, because they never had to build the discipline needed to rule effectively. That lack of initial struggle can lead to a real decline.
Interesting. He also goes into some more psychological stuff, doesn't he? This father murder idea, especially with chess and fatherless heroes. That sounds complex.
It is, and it's fascinating. Greene suggests that sometimes the drive for power comes from needing to overcome some kind of authority figure, even symbolically.
Like in chess.
In chess, he suggests the unconscious motive might be a symbolic triumph over a father figure. He links this to myths. Moses, Hercules, Alexander heroes, often depicted without a strong father figure. The idea being, maybe the absence of that initial figure to compete with pushed them to seek power on a grander scale.
Kind of creating your own path because one wasn't laid out.
Exactly. And he even mentions Paul Morphy, the chess genius, suggesting his career might have been a way to channel energy after his father died. Yeah. Then there's this other intriguing bit about being wrecked by success.
Right, if you can only handle it in your imagination.
Yeah. It's like the struggle itself builds the capacity, the resilience, to actually handle achievement when it comes. Without the struggle, success might overwhelm you.
So pulling all that together for Law 41, what are the implied do's and don'ts?
Okay, on the do side, definitely be wary of offers that seem too good to be true. Cultivate a healthy skepticism.
Right.
Recognize the value in your own effort, even in the struggle itself, and prioritize self-reliance. Avoid becoming too dependent.
And the don't.
Don't get complacent with stuff you didn't earn. Never just assume free things come with no strings attached. Always try to figure out the real motives behind gifts or favors.
So for listeners, the practical takeaway is approach those amazing free opportunities with a questioning mind. Realize that investing your own time, energy, resources often leads to deeper mastery and ownership.
And always be aware of why someone might be offering you something for nothing. Understand the exchange, even if it's not obvious.
Good advice. Okay, let's shift gears. Law 42, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. What's the core idea here?
Law 42 argues that when you're facing trouble from a group, The source of that trouble often comes down to one single influential person, the
A
shepherd,
leader, basically.
or the main instigator, yeah. And the law says if you focus your efforts on neutralizing or removing that person, you can effectively break the group's unity and its ability to cause problems. It's about finding the linchpin.
Greene loves his historical examples. The story of Pope Boniface VIII and Dante in Florence is pretty dramatic, isn't it? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's a great illustration. Florence back then was torn between two factions, the blacks and the whites. Dante Alighieri was a prominent figure, a real leader within the white faction.
Okay.
Pope Boniface VIII wanted control over Florence. He saw Dante's influence as a major obstacle, so he concocted this plan
Which was?
to lure Dante to Rome, pretending it was for negotiations. While Dante was away, Boniface secretly worked with and supported the black faction. Getting Dante out of Florence was the crucial step.
So by removing Dante the shepherd.
Exactly. The white faction was suddenly leaderless, disorganized. It created a power vacuum. And that allowed Boniface's allies, the blacks, backed by papal influence and money, to just swoop in and take control of Florence. Dante, when he tried to return, found himself condemned to exile.
Wow. That perfectly shows how targeting one key individual can just completely destabilize a whole group.
It's a stark lesson. And Greene gives other examples too, maybe less traumatic, but still relevant.
Like what?
Well, he mentions Dr. Milton Erickson's family therapy techniques, where sometimes he'd symbolically isolate the family member who was stirring up most of the conflict.
Interesting. In a therapeutic context.
Right. And he points to Mao Zedong, who apparently isolated key rivals within the Communist Party elite to reduce their power without needing massive purges. Same principle, different arena.
And even in court politics, right, like Robert Cecil getting the Earl of Essex and Sir Walter Raleigh sent away from Queen Elizabeth's court.
Exactly. Sending them away on missions or duties effectively isolated them from the center of power, allowing Cecil to consolidate his own influence with the Queen. Isolation in various forms is a key tactic here. Greene even notes how con artists and seducers often work to isolate their targets, get them away from friends, family, their usual support system, makes them more vulnerable.
Right. Makes sense.
And he throws in that great Chinese proverb, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter.
That sums it up pretty well. So, based on all this, what are the do's and don'ts for striking the shepherd?
Okay, do's. Learn to spot the real influencers, the troublemakers, the key figures in any group. Focus your energy on neutralizing them rather than scattering your efforts fighting minor players. And consider isolation as a strategic option.
And the don'ts?
Don't waste resources fighting lots of less important opponents. And crucially, never underestimate the power of that single charismatic or disruptive individual to hold things together or stir things up.
So the practical takeaway for listeners, look closely at the group dynamics you encounter, work, social circles, whatever. Identify those central figures.
Yeah, because addressing the core influence can be way more efficient than dealing with, widespread crumbling that lacks real leadership.
But there's a flip side too, a warning almost.
Absolutely. You have to be careful not to become that easily identifiable shepherd yourself. Because if you're the central figure, you automatically become the main target for anyone looking to disrupt your group or undermine your influence.
Good point. Okay, let's move to the next one. Law 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. This feels like a shift towards persuasion.
It definitely is. The core idea of Law 43 is that long-term lasting influence isn't really built through force or making people do things. It's built through persuasion, even seduction in a broader sense.
Seduction.
Meaning appealing to people's desires, their emotions. To really get people on your side for the long haul, you need to understand their individual psychology, what makes them tick emotionally. It's about making them want to follow you, not just making them obey.
That definitely ties into understanding different perspectives, which I know listeners appreciate. So who does Greene use as examples here? Cyrus the Great.
Yes. Cyrus the Great is a fantastic example. He used a really clever method to win over the Persians.
How so? He understood contract.
Exactly. To get the Persians fired up to rebel against the Medes, he first made them do a full day of really tough, back-breaking labor, clearing thorny ground, really unpleasant work.
Okay.
Then the very next day, he throws them this lavish feast, amazing food, plenty of wine, a total contrast to the day before.
I see where this is going.
Right.
Yeah.
He then asks them straight up, which day did you prefer? The answer's obvious. And Cyrus used that visceral feeling, that direct comparison, to show them that following him meant choosing abundance and ease over hardship. He appealed directly to their desire for a better life.
Very direct, almost using their senses to persuade them. Now, contrast that with someone who failed spectacularly at this, Marie Antoinette.
Oh, Marie Antoinette is the perfect cautionary tale for this long. She grew up indulged, never really learned how to connect with people or, frankly, how to please them.
She was detached.
Completely. As Queen of France, she stayed aloof, totally out of touch with the growing suffering and anger of the French people. She just retreated into her own little world of luxury at the Petit Trianon, made zero effort to understand them, let alone win their affection.
And that had, well, devastating consequences.
Absolutely catastrophic. Her perceived arrogance, her indifference, it just poured fuel on the fire of resentment that led to the revolution. When the crisis hit, she had no reservoir of goodwill, no popular support to fall back on, because she'd never bothered to work on their hearts and minds.
A really stark reminder about needing connection, empathy, especially in leadership. Okay, Greene also gives a more complex example, though. Chico Liang and this barbarian king, Mengguo.
Yes, this one's fascinating because it's about patient, long-term psychological strategy. Chico Liang was facing this rebellion in the south, led by King Mengguo. He knew just crushing them militarily wouldn't bring lasting peace.
So what did he do?
So every time he captured Mengguo, and this happened multiple times, he didn't execute him or humiliate him. Instead, he treated Mengguo's captured soldiers really well, gave them food, care, then released them. And he'd release Mengguo too, knowing he'd probably attack again.
He kept letting him go. How many times?
7 times. Each time, Chico Liang showed mercy, treated the soldiers well. He was patiently working on the psychology of Mengguo and his followers.
And eventually.
Eventually, Mengguo himself was just worn down. No, more like won over. Deeply affected by this consistent, humane treatment. By the 7th capture, he genuinely surrendered his loyalty. Not because he was beaten by force, but because Chico Liang had masterfully worked on his heart and mind.
Wow, that's playing the long game. It really shows the power of understanding and, well, positive reinforcement over just brute force.
Exactly. And Greene sprinkles in other examples too. Napoleon understood you have to move the masses, not just the elites.
Yeah.
Alexander the Great refusing water when his troops were thirsty. That small gesture showed empathy, won instant loyalty.
Great.
Even T.E. Lawrence, thinking of each soldier's mind as a separate kingdom, you had to conquer through understanding their individual motivations.
Okay, so let's boil this down. The do's and don'ts for working on hearts and minds.
All right, do's. Really study people. Understand their emotions, their desires, their weaknesses. Tailor your approach. One size doesn't fit all. Prioritize persuasion, subtle influence, seduction over just ordering people around. Offer relief, create pleasure. Use symbolic gestures that hit emotionally.
And the don'ts.
Don't assume everyone wants the same thing or is motivated the same way. Don't ignore or dismiss how people feel. Don't rely only on coercion or threats. And definitely don't act entitled or take loyalty for granted.
So the practical takeaway for listeners, practice empathy. Really listen to understand where others are coming from. Frame your ideas, your requests, in ways that appeal to their self-interest, their emotions.
And remember, building genuine rapport, real loyalty that pays off way more in the long run than just forcing compliance.
It's total sense. Okay, law number 4 for today. Law 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. This one sounds potentially manipulative. What's the core idea?
It can be, definitely. Law 44 is all about the power of imitation, often subconscious. The core idea is that by mirroring, reflecting back other people's actions, their behaviors, even their deeper psychology, you can achieve some powerful effects.
Like what?
Well, you can disarm them, make them less suspicious because you seem similar. Or you can actually infuriate them by showing them their own negativity. It's a subtle tool for navigating social situations. Greene actually breaks it down into a few specific types of mirroring.
Okay, intriguing. Tell us about the first one.
The first is the neutralizing effect. Think of Perseus looking at Medusa's reflection in his shield to avoid her deadly gaze.
Right.
Similarly, by mirroring what your opponent does, you kind of obscure your own strategy. You become a reflection, making it hard for them to figure out your real intentions. It neutralizes their ability to predict what you'll do next. Very useful in competition.
Like blending into the background to avoid being an easy target? What's another use?
Then there's the narcissus effect.
Yeah.
This is about mirroring someone's deep-seated desires, their values, their self-image.
Playing to their ego?
Essentially, yes. By reflecting back what they already believe or want to believe about themselves, you create this powerful feeling of connection, of being understood. Greene uses Alcibiades as a prime example.
The Athenian general.
Yeah. He was apparently a master at shifting his behavior, his way of talking, to perfectly mirror whoever he was trying to influence: Socrates, the Athenian assembly, even the Persians. He became what they wanted to see.
So you make them feel validated, understood, which is seductive. But Greene warns about this too, right?
Absolutely. The Narcissus effect is potent, but if people catch on, if they feel you're being fake or manipulative, it backfires hugely. Leads to feelings of betrayal, deep resentment. Alcibiades experienced that eventually. It's a fine line.
Okay, what other kinds of mirroring are there?
There's the moral effect. This isn't just mimicking behavior. It's about reflecting someone's negative actions back at them, so they have to confront how unpleasant their own behavior is.
Like giving them a taste of their own medicine.
Exactly. Greene uses Ivan the Terrible, putting a puppet czar, Simeon Bekmambetov, on the throne for a while. The idea was that Simeon's actions reflected the disrespect and chaos the boyars, the nobles, were causing. It forced them to see the consequences of their own actions without Ivan having to directly call them out.
A way to teach a lesson indirectly by making them look in the mirror. Any others?
The last one Greene discusses is the hallucinatory effect. This is about creating a perfect imitation of something, a place, an object, even a person, to deceive people.
Like a con artist.
Precisely. He mentions Yellow Kid Weil, the famous con man who built entire fake banks or brokerage firms, perfect replicas, to fool his victims. It exploits our tendency to trust appearances, to believe what looks real.
Extreme mimicry for deception. Okay, so summing up Law 44, the do's and don'ts of the mirror effect.
Okay, does. Observe your opponents. Subtly mimic their actions to hide your own plans. Neutralizing effect. Reflect people's values and desires to build rapport or seduce them. Narcissus effect. Consider using the moral effect to make people face their own bad behavior. And if needed, create convincing illusions. Hallucinatory effect.
The don'ts?
Don't overuse it to the point you seem fake or obviously manipulative. Be careful with the Narcissus effect. Insincerity can cause a huge backlash. And interestingly, Greene warns about unconsciously falling into situations that mirror negative patterns from your own past. Don't repeat history blindly.
That's a really interesting psychological point. So for listeners, takeaways are about awareness. Notice when others might be mirroring you. Think about using mirroring strategically yourself, maybe to connect, maybe to disarm.
Yeah, and understand the different kinds of mirroring. It's not just simple imitation, but always base it on genuine observation. Superficial mimicry usually falls flat.
Good advice. Okay, let's tackle our final law for this deep dive. Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. This sounds very relevant to, well, almost any situation involving change.
It really is. The core idea of Law 45 addresses that deep-seated human resistance to big, fast changes. Intellectually, people might agree change is needed, but emotionally, we're creatures of habit. We cling to the familiar.
Too much change, too fast feels scary, disruptive.
Exactly. It can be unsettling, even feel traumatic, and that often leads to pushback, resistance, backlash. So the law advises, yes, talk about the need for change, preach its virtues, but when you actually implement it, do it gradually.
And maybe disguise it a bit.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
Cloak reforms and familiar language use old symbols connected to the past. This minimizes the sense of disruption and makes it easier for people to accept. It ties into your point about processing information. Gradual change is just easier to digest.
Greene gives a really stark example of doing this wrong with Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Cromwell was tasked with implementing Henry's break from the Catholic Church, and he went at it with incredible speed and thoroughness.
Too much, too fast.
Way too much, too fast. Dissolving monasteries, seizing wealth, imposing new religious rules almost overnight. Henry wanted the break for his own reasons, but he probably didn't anticipate such a radical, swift overhaul of the entire religious structure.
And the result?
Widespread chaos. Uprisings, rebellions like the Pilgrimage of Grace. People were deeply unsettled. And ultimately, Cromwell himself took the fall. The king reacted against the very instability Cromwell's rapid reforms had caused.
A powerful lesson in pacing, so Greene must contrast this with more successful approaches.
He does. He talks about how, throughout history, successful change often involves adapting old traditions rather than just obliterating them.
Like how?
Think about how ancient midwinter festivals got absorbed into Christmas celebrations, or how the early Roman Republic kept some of the symbols and structures of the monarchy to ease the transition. It's about creating a sense of continuity.
Making the new feel less alien by linking it to the old. He also talks about Mao Zedong using Chinese history, right?
Yes, Mao was very strategic about this. He knew the Chinese peasantry was deeply conservative. So instead of presenting communism as a complete break from the past, he framed it as a continuation of historical Chinese struggles for justice.
How'd you do that?
He drew parallels to famous historical figures, popular legends like the Water Margin. He presented his revolution as being rooted in Chinese identity, even using historical debates like Confucianism versus legalism to frame his own political fights.
So he used the past to sell a radical future. Very clever.
Very. Greene also brings up Machiavelli again, advising rulers to keep the appearance of old institutions even when making big changes. And Cosimo de' Medici in Florence, publicly supporting the Republic while quietly building his family's power behind the scenes. It's about managing perception.
Okay, so the key do's and don'ts for Law 45. Preaching change, but reforming gradually.
Right, Gus. Argue for why change is needed, but implement it step by step at a pace people can handle. Show respect for existing habits and traditions. Don't just dismiss them. Try to wrap big changes in familiar symbols or language. Reinterpret the past if you need to make your changes seem like a natural evolution and improvement.
And the don'ts.
Don't push too much change too quickly. Never underestimate how deeply people resist upheaval that ingrained conservatism. Don't create a vacuum or a sense of chaos by just trashing the past without offering a clear, reassuring bridge to the future.
So for listeners, the practical takeaway is when you're introducing new ideas, whether at work or anywhere else, think carefully about the pace and the presentation.
Look for ways to connect the new stuff to things people already know or value. Use familiar examples, existing frameworks. Understand the context, the culture. How much change can this group actually tolerate right now?
Gradual evolution often beats sudden revolution. Makes sense.
So that covers the 5 laws we set out to explore in this deep dive, drawing from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
Right. We started with Law 41, despise the free lunch, looking at those hidden costs and why self-reliance matters.
Then we hit Law 42, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter, all about the strategic value of targeting key influencers.
Followed by Law 43, work on the hearts and minds of others, emphasizing persuasion, empathy, understanding psychology over force.
Then Law 44, disarm and infuriate with a mirror effect, exploring those different ways imitation can be used strategically, neutralizing, seducing, teaching.
And we just finished with Law 45, preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once, focusing on gradual implementation and respecting tradition.
And for each one, we've tried to cover the core idea, Greene's historical illustrations, those implied do's and don'ts, and some practical takeaways, all based on the material provided.
So perhaps a final thought for you listening. Consider a situation you've been in recently, maybe a group dynamic that shifted, or an offer that seemed too good to be true, or an attempt to introduce a change. How might one of these laws shed light on what was really going on?
That's a great way to think about it. And with that, we can confirm this concludes our comprehensive deep dive into these specific 5 laws from the 48 Laws of Power based on the sources provided.